The spoon clattered against the bowl, too loud in the quiet kitchen. David's hand trembled as he tried again, missing his mouth entirely. Oatmeal dripped down his chin, and I reached for the napkin without thinking, wiping it away like I'd done 1,000 times before. But his eyes, they weren't confused this time. They were sharp, focused. And for just a second, I swear I saw annoyance flash across his face before it melted back into that vacant stare I'd grown so familiar with. My name is Vivian, and I've been living in a nightmare disguised as devotion for 5 years. 5 years of watching my husband disappear piece by piece. 5 years of explaining to friends why we couldn't make dinner plans anymore, why I looked so tired, why I'd stopped talking about the future. David was 53 when the diagnosis came, too young for this cruel disease to steal him away. But dementia doesn't care about age or fairness or the life we'd built together. We met at a hospital fundraiser 12 years ago. I was a nurse working double shifts, and he was a financial advisor who just donated a ridiculous amount of money to the children's wing. He had this laugh that filled a room, this way of making everyone around him feel like they mattered. We were married within a year. It was fast, but it felt right. He felt right. Now I barely recognized him. The man sitting across from me wore his face, but everything else was gone. The quick wit. The Sunday morning pancakes he used to make while dancing to old jazz records. The way he'd pull me close during thunderstorms because he knew I hated them, even though I'd never told him. He just knew. Dementia stole all of that, piece by piece, memory by memory. Or so I thought. I set the napkin down and my fingers brushed against his. They were warm, steady, not shaking anymore. Strange, I thought, but pushed it away. I'd given up my nursing job 3 years ago to care for him full-time. We'd burned through most of our savings on specialists, medications that didn't work, and home modifications to keep him safe. The house we'd planned to fill with children now had locks on the outside of doors and padding on sharp corners. I was 41 years old and I felt ancient, hollowed out, running on fumes and obligation. My sister Rachel called it noble. My few remaining friends called it devoted. I called it survival. The first odd thing happened 3 months ago. I'd come home from the grocery store to find every light in the house off. David was supposed to be napping upstairs, but when I climbed the stairs in the darkness, my heart hammering, I found him sitting in his chair by the window, completely still, watching the street below. When I flipped the switch, he jumped like I'd startled him from deep thought, not the fog of confusion. "David!" I'd whispered. His face rearranged itself. Slack. Empty. "Vivian, when did you get home?" The transformation was so fast, so complete, that I blamed it on my own exhaustion. Sundowning, I told myself. The disease playing tricks. His neurologist had warned me about it, how patients could seem different in the evening hours, more agitated or confused. But David hadn't seemed confused in that moment before the light came on. He'd seemed focused, present, alert. Then last month, I couldn't find my mother's pearl necklace. The one I kept in my jewelry box, the one David had never touched, not even before the diagnosis. I tore apart the bedroom looking for it, crying on my hands and knees, convinced I was losing my mind too. That the stress was finally breaking me. 3 days later, it appeared on my dresser. Right where I'd looked a dozen times. When I asked David about it, he just blinked at me with those empty eyes. "What necklace, sweetie?" The coffee pot beeped, pulling me back to the present. I poured myself a cup, inhaling the bitter scent, letting it ground me in something real and normal. Behind me, David continued eating, the scrape of metal against ceramic setting my teeth on edge. I turned to watch him. Really watch him. He lifted the spoon smoothly to his mouth. No tremor. No mess. His movements were controlled, practiced, nothing like the fumbling struggle from minutes before. He chewed carefully, swallowed, then reached for his orange juice with steady fingers. My stomach twisted. "David, honey, How are you feeling today? He looked up, and there it was again. That flash of something. Alert. Aware. Irritated, even. Then his expression melted like wax, features going soft and confused. Tired, he mumbled, and this time he deliberately let oatmeal dribble from his lips. I watched it happen. Watched him do it on purpose. Where am I? My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I like to know how far my stories are reaching, and a like and subscribe means a lot to small channels like ours and will keep these stories coming. Now let's continue. The smell of his unwashed hair hit me as I leaned closer. When had I last convinced him to shower? 2 days? 3. He used to be so meticulous about his appearance, my handsome husband who ironed his shirts every Sunday night and kept his shoes polished to a mirror shine. Now he sat in stained pajamas that reeked of sweat and something sour, looking at me with eyes that seemed to know too much and nothing at all. "You're home," I said softly, my voice barely steady. "You're safe." But I was the one who didn't feel safe anymore. I'd started noticing other things too. Small things that gnawed at the edges of my sanity. Our bank account had been slowly draining, $100 here, 50 there. Small enough that I'd blamed it on my own forgetfulness, on automatic payments I'd forgotten to cancel, on the fog of exhaustion that clouded my days. But when I checked our statements last week, the ATM withdrawals were always at times when I was supposedly watching David. When he was supposedly too confused to dress himself, let alone walk to the bank 3 blocks away and remember a PIN number. Then there was what Mrs. Chen told me. Sweet 70-year-old Mrs. Chen from next door, who'd lived there for 30 years and knew everyone's business. "I saw David in the front yard at 2 in the morning last week," she'd said, catching me as I checked the mail. Her face was pinched with concern. "Just standing there in the dark, Vivian, staring at the street. It startled me half to death when I got up for water and looked out the window. I almost called you, but then he went back inside." I'd thanked her, laughed it off, said he must have been sleepwalking. But David had never sleepwalked. Not once in all our years together. And when I'd asked him about it the next morning, he'd looked at me with those vacant eyes and said, "I don't remember that, Em. You know I don't remember things." That afternoon, while David napped or pretended to, I sat in my car in the pharmacy parking lot with a small box in my lap. The hidden camera was smaller than I'd expected, disguised as a phone charger. My hands shook as I turned it over, reading the instructions I'd already memorized during a sleepless night. I felt sick doing this, like I was violating him, betraying him, spying on a sick man who couldn't even remember what he ate for breakfast. What kind of wife was I? What kind of person suspected their dying husband of playing some sick game? But then I remembered the necklace appearing out of nowhere. The lights. The way he'd looked at me this morning with eyes that saw everything before the mask slipped back into place. The money. The midnight wandering. The 2 perfect moments of confusion that felt rehearsed. I went inside and bought the camera. I installed it in our bedroom that evening, positioning it on the dresser between a picture frame from our wedding and my jewelry box. The tiny lens was invisible unless you knew exactly where to look, pointing directly at David's side of the bed. He shuffled in at 8 o'clock for his early bedtime, moving like a man 3 times his age, and I helped him under the covers, kissing his forehead like always. His skin was cool, papery. He closed his eyes immediately, his breathing evening out almost too quickly. I left the door cracked and went downstairs to my laptop, my heart a wild thing in my chest. The camera fed directly to an app on my computer. I could see our bed in grainy night vision, David's form still beneath the blankets, perfectly motionless. I watched for an hour. Nothing. He didn't move, didn't stir. I made tea, the chamomile scent doing nothing to calm my nerves. Watched another hour. My eyes grew heavy. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was the one losing my mind, seeing patterns in nothing, paranoid from years of stress and isolation. Then, at 10:47 p.m., David sat straight up in bed. Not the slow, confused movement of someone waking from sleep. He sat up quickly, smoothly, like a man who'd been awake the whole time. Like a man who'd been waiting. He turned his head slowly, deliberately, scanning the room. Then he looked directly at the camera. And smiled. Not the sweet, confused smile of my sick husband. This was something else. Something cold. Calculating. Triumphant. He stared right into the lens, right into my eyes through the screen, and mouthed 2 words. I know. I slammed the laptop shut so hard the sound cracked through the empty living room like a gunshot. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. The tea I'd made sat forgotten, going cold, while my mind tried to make sense of what I'd just seen. That smile. Those words. The absolute clarity in his eyes as he looked directly at the camera, directly at me, knowing exactly what he was doing. I opened the laptop again with trembling fingers. The screen showed our bedroom, but the bed was empty now. David was gone. My heart stopped. I checked the timestamp. Only 30 seconds had passed since I'd closed it. 30 seconds and he'd vanished from the frame like he'd never been there at all. I heard footsteps above me. Slow. Deliberate. Moving across the bedroom floor toward the hallway. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to grab my keys and leave, but this was my house. My husband. The man I'd sacrificed everything for. I deserved answers. I stood up, my legs weak, and moved to the bottom of the stairs. The footsteps stopped. David. My voice came out small, frightened. I hated how scared I sounded. Silence. Heavy and waiting. Then his voice drifted down, and it wasn't the confused mumble I'd grown used to. It was clear. Strong. The voice of the man I'd married, the one I thought dementia had stolen. You should have trusted me, Vivian. The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the banister, my knuckles white. What's going on? I called up. What is this? Come upstairs. We need to talk. Something in his tone made my skin crawl. Too calm. Too controlled. This wasn't my David, the man who'd held me through my father's funeral, who'd surprised me with weekend getaways just because. This was a stranger wearing his face. But I climbed the stairs anyway. Each step felt like walking toward the edge of a cliff. He was sitting on the edge of our bed when I reached the doorway, fully dressed in jeans and a button-down shirt I hadn't seen him wear in years. His hair was combed. His face was alert, watching me with an intensity that made me want to run. You've been faking it, I whispered. All of it. The dementia. The confusion. Everything. He tilted his head, studying me like I was a stranger. Not all of it. The diagnosis was real, Vivian. Early stage. Mild cognitive impairment, they called it. Could take 10-15 years to progress. Might never get worse at all. The room spun. I grabbed the doorframe to steady myself. 5 years, I choked out. I gave up everything. My job. My friends. My life. For 5 years I've been taking care of you, cleaning you, feeding you, and you've been lying. I needed to know. Know what? I was screaming now, tears streaming down my face. Know what, David? He stood up, and I flinched. He noticed, and something flickered across his face. Hurt, maybe. Or satisfaction. I couldn't tell anymore. I needed to know if you really loved me. If you'd stay when things got hard. If you were the woman I thought you were, or just another person who'd leave when the money ran out. The money. Oh God, the money. The withdrawals, I said. You've been taking cash. Hiding it. Planning this. Planning my future, he corrected. Our savings are gone, yes. But not on medical bills. I've been moving it somewhere safe. Somewhere you can't touch it. I felt like I'd been punched. Why? Why would you do this to me? He moved closer, and I backed into the hallway. His eyes, those eyes I'd gazed into on our wedding day, were cold. My first wife left me the moment my father's business went under. Took half of everything and married a cardiologist within 6 months. My mother abandoned my father when he had his first stroke, put him in a home and never visited. I've watched people my whole life, Vivian. Watched them promise forever and deliver nothing. So you tested me? You tortured me for 5 years as a test. I gave you every opportunity to leave, to put me in a facility, to move on with your life. But you stayed. You sacrificed. You proved you were different. The praise in his voice made me sick. And now? I asked. Now that I've passed your twisted test, what? We just go back to normal? Pretend this never happened. He smiled, and it was the saddest thing I'd ever seen. Now you know the truth, and we can finally have a real marriage. No more pretending. No more lies. No more lies. I laughed, hysterical. You've been lying to me every single day for 5 years. You watched me cry. You watched me break. You let me think I was losing my mind. You're upset. I understand. But you'll see, Vivian. This was necessary. Now we know what we mean to each other. I stared at him, this stranger who'd stolen my husband's face, and something inside me shifted. The fear drained away, replaced by something colder. Harder. You're right, I said quietly. Now I know exactly what you are. His smile widened. He thought he'd won. He had no idea what was coming. I turned and walked downstairs, my mind racing. Behind me, I heard him follow, his footsteps confident now. No more shuffling. No more pretending to be weak. I know this is a shock, he said, his voice reasonable, like he was explaining a simple business transaction. But think about it, Vivian. How many couples can say they've been tested like this? How many can say their love is real? I reached the kitchen and turned to face him. He stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light, looking pleased with himself. Where's the money, David? Somewhere safe. We can discuss that later, when you've had time to process everything. And the dementia diagnosis? Was any of it real? He shrugged. Mild cognitive issues. Nothing that a healthy lifestyle and some supplements won't manage. The doctors were overly cautious. But it gave me an idea. A way to know for sure. To know if I was a good enough wife. To know if you were the right woman for me. I nodded slowly, like I was beginning to understand. Like I was coming around to his twisted logic. His shoulders relaxed. He actually looked relieved. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this, he said. I was worried you might react badly. Oh, I'm reacting, I said softly. Just not the way you expected. His smile faltered. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone. You weren't the only one recording things, David. The color drained from his face. Every doctor's appointment for the last 5 years, I took notes. Detailed notes about your symptoms. How you couldn't remember simple things. How you needed help with basic tasks. How you were declining. I swiped through my phone, showing him the screen. I documented everything. Photos, videos, written accounts, evidence of severe dementia. Vivian, what are you doing? You wanted to test me? Well, congratulations. You created a paper trail of mental incompetence that any court would believe. 5 years of medical records showing progressive cognitive decline. 5 years of me as your primary caregiver, making all your decisions. He stepped toward me, his hand outstretched. You wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Wouldn't use this documentation to have you declared mentally incompetent? Wouldn't petition for legal guardianship over your finances and medical decisions? Wouldn't find that money you hid and take back everything you stole from us? His face twisted with rage, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. You can't do this. I'll tell them the truth. I'll tell them I was faking. I smiled. It felt like ice on my face. Really? You'll tell them you deliberately faked dementia for 5 years to manipulate your wife? That you drained your savings account and hid assets while pretending to be incompetent? That sounds like fraud, David. Financial abuse. Maybe even elder abuse, considering you're 58 now. I'm not elderly. No, but you're a man with a documented diagnosis who's been under full-time care for 5 years. Who's going to believe you suddenly recovered? That this isn't just another symptom of your declining mental state? Delusions. Paranoia. Classic signs of progression. He lunged at me, but I was ready. I'd backed myself into the corner by the phone, and I grabbed it, my fingers already dialing. Don't, he growled. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice filled the kitchen. David froze. My husband has dementia, I said, my voice shaking perfectly, just the right amount of fear. He's having an episode. He's confused and aggressive. Please, I need help. I think he's trying to hurt me. Ma'am, are you safe right now? David's face went pale. He could see it happening, could see his perfect plan unraveling. Please hurry, I whispered into the phone. And then I heard it. The sound that changed everything. A key turning in our front door. We both turned toward the sound. The door opened, and a woman walked in. Young. Beautiful. She froze when she saw us, her eyes going wide. David, she said. I thought you said she'd be at her sister's tonight. Time stopped. The woman stood in my doorway, keys dangling from her fingers. My house keys. She was maybe 25, wearing a designer coat I could never afford, her dark hair perfectly styled. She looked between David and me, and I watched the realization dawn on her face that she'd made a terrible mistake. Who the hell are you? I asked, though some part of me already knew. David moved fast, stepping between us. Melissa, you need to leave. Now. Melissa. The name hit me like a slap. I'd heard that name before. His new financial advisor, he'd said, back before the diagnosis. Before he supposedly couldn't remember things like names or appointments or apparently where he'd hidden his mistress. You've been bringing her here? My voice was barely a whisper. Into our home? The 911 operator was still on the line. Ma'am? Ma'am, are you still there? Officers are on the way. I looked at the phone in my hand, then at David, then at this woman holding keys to my house. The betrayal was so complete, so thorough, that I almost laughed. How long? I asked. Melissa shifted uncomfortably. I should go. How long? I screamed it this time, and she flinched. 6 years, David said quietly. We met 6 years ago. Before the diagnosis. Before any of this started. The timeline clicked into place like puzzle pieces I'd been too blind to see. Ma'am, please stay on the line. The operator's voice sounded far away. The dementia test, I said slowly. It wasn't about love. It was about making me into your caretaker so you could have your freedom. So you could spend our money on her while I was too busy cleaning up your fake drool to notice. David had the decency to look uncomfortable. It's more complicated than that. Is it? Because it seems pretty simple to me. You wanted everything. The devoted wife at home. the young girlfriend on the side. And you wanted me too grateful that you were still alive to question where you went during your confused, wandering episodes. Melissa spoke up, her voice defensive. He told me you were separated, that you were just staying for the insurance. Did he tell you I gave up my career to take care of him? That I wiped his chin and helped him dress and spent every night wondering if this was the day he'd forget my name? Her face flushed. I didn't know. He said you barely spoke. That it was just an arrangement. Get out of my house. She looked at David, waiting for him to protect her, to save her. He said nothing. Get out. I threw the phone at her. She ducked, and it shattered against the wall behind her head. She grabbed her purse and ran, the door slamming behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. David and I stood there, 5 feet apart, strangers who'd shared a bed for 12 years. I could hear sirens in the distance, getting closer. You destroyed me, I said. For what? For her. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. Explain how this was worth 5 years of my life. Explain how watching me break down and cry and blame myself for not being a good enough caretaker was part of your master plan. He ran his hands through his hair, the gesture so familiar it hurt. The diagnosis scared me. The idea of slowly losing myself, of becoming dependent. I thought if I controlled it, if I chose when and how to be weak, I could handle it. And yes, I wanted to know if you'd stay. But I also wanted freedom while I still had my mind. Time with someone who didn't look at me like I was dying. So you made me think I was going insane instead. I never meant for it to go this far. The sirens were on our street now. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows. What's the plan now, David? The police are here. What story are you going to tell them? He looked panicked, trapped. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. That I'm fine. That you were confused. That I was confused? That's beautiful. Really? Pounding on the door. Police. Open up. I walked past David, so close I could smell his cologne. The expensive one he supposedly couldn't remember he liked. I opened the door to 2 officers, 1 man and 1 woman, both with their hands resting on their belts. Ma'am, we got a 911 call about an aggressive dementia patient. I looked back at David. He was sweating now, his confident mask cracking. Officers, I'm so sorry. False alarm. My husband had an episode, but he's calmed down now. I shouldn't have called. David's eyes widened. He didn't understand what I was doing. The female officer looked skeptical. Are you sure, ma'am? We heard shouting. And someone reported seeing a woman running from your house in distress. That was a misunderstanding. A friend of ours. She got startled when David had his episode. Really, everything's fine now. The officers exchanged glances. The male one looked past me at David. Sir, are you all right? This was David's moment. His chance to tell the truth. To expose everything and take back control. I watched him struggle with it. Watched him calculate the angles. If he told them he was fine, he'd have to explain the 911 call, the fleeing woman, the 5 years of documented medical fraud. If he played along with my story, he'd have to go back to being the confused dementia patient. I'm okay, he said finally, his voice small. I just got confused. Vivian takes good care of me. The officers looked unconvinced but nodded. If you're sure, ma'am, we'll file a report. If you need anything, you can call us back. Thank you, officers. I really am sorry for wasting your time. They left, and I closed the door. David stared at me. Why did you do that? Because I'm not done with you yet. I walked to the kitchen table and sat down, suddenly exhausted. Every muscle in my body ached. 5 years of tension releasing all at once. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Tomorrow, you're going to meet with our lawyer. You're going to sign over power of attorney to me, citing your declining mental health. You're going to tell me where every penny of our money is hidden. And you're going to do it willingly. And if I don't, then I go to the police with everything. The fake dementia, the hidden assets, the financial fraud, the mistress you've been spending our money on. I'll bury you so deep in legal problems you'll wish you actually had dementia. His jaw clenched. You're bluffing. I pulled out my phone, the new one from my pocket, and showed him the screen. A recording app, running the entire time. Every word he'd said tonight. Every confession. Try me. The fight went out of him. He slumped into a chair, his head in his hands. What do you want? Everything. The house. The money. A divorce. And I want you to live with what you've done. Every single day, I want you to remember that you had someone who loved you enough to sacrifice everything, and you turned it into a game. Vivian, please. Don't. My voice was ice. Don't say my name like you have the right. You wanted to test me? You wanted to see what I was made of? Well, congratulations. You found out. I stood up, every movement deliberate. You can sleep in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow we start the paperwork. And David, if you ever contact me again after this is done, if you ever try to hurt me or harass me, I'll release everything. Every recording. Every piece of evidence. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you are. He looked up at me, and for the first time in 5 years, I saw my husband clearly. Not the man I'd married. Not the patient I'd cared for. Just a weak, selfish stranger who'd gambled everything and lost. I did love you, he whispered. No, I said. You loved the idea of me. The version that would pass your test and never ask questions. But that person is dead now. You killed her. I walked upstairs to our bedroom, the room where I'd watched him on that camera, where everything had shattered and reformed into something harder. Something that would never break again. 3 months later, I stood in the driveway of a small apartment across town, loading the last box into my car. The divorce was final. The money was back in my account, every hidden penny recovered. David was living with Melissa now, I'd heard. Good luck to her. I'd started taking nursing classes again, reached out to old friends, joined a support group for caregivers, where I told them a carefully edited version of my story. The connections felt real in a way nothing had for years. My phone rang. An unknown number. Hello. Vivian. David's voice, small and scared. Something's wrong. I can't remember things. Real things. I think the dementia is actually progressing and I don't know what to do. Melissa left. I'm alone and I'm scared and I need help. I thought about 5 years of my life. 5 years of lies and manipulation and tests I never asked to take. I thought about mercy, about compassion, about the woman I used to be who would have dropped everything to help. I'm sorry, I said. You have the wrong number. And I hung up. The rain started as I drove away, drops hitting the windshield in a steady rhythm. I turned on the wipers and kept driving, leaving behind the house, the lies, and the man who'd thought love was something you could test. I never looked back.